we're here to help people level up their money, right? To get serious about their money. And a lot of you that listen in, we've heard from you and you're taking it seriously, which is fantastic. We're here to help you with your money moves on your wealth journey. But you get to a point where it's like, okay, I've got the basics. And besides the obvious of what's holding you back, if you're just tuning in for the first time, obviously number one is a budget, a spending plan, right? Getting intentional about every dollar that's coming in, making sure it's working for you and things like that. Number two is if you've got debt, it's time to get out of debt. And I'm not necessarily talking about your mortgage. You time that with your retirement years, but everything else, the cars, the credit cards, the personal loans, things like that. If you've got title loans or whatever, get away from those things, right? Because they're eating up your money every month and keep you from building wealth, right? And then lastly, looking at that wealth plan, having a plan in place. You're not just throwing money into something and hoping it all works out. You've got somebody who's not just doing something for you, but actually teaching you, right? You've got one of the 15% of the financial advisors out there like us that are teaching you rather than just selling you stuff. Okay. With that, you get those in place and it's like, okay, well, what else may be holding you back? And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, right, Wendy? Yep. You look at this and it's like, okay, there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of moving parts. So we're going to focus on just a few of those today. So take some notes. But, when you kind of looking at this, what do you think, what are one of the things that jump to your mind as far as holding people back? They got the basics. What else is holding them back?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big thing right now that I hear a lot is just as far as like what people are getting paid versus the inflation and the cost of living, right? It's becoming more and more expensive to live, to buy groceries, to, put gas in your car. Yet we're all, as far as the standard job, people are getting paid the same. And I actually even worked for a short time, consulted for a company, and they did an annual report talking about wages, and they're not increasing nearly at the rate that the cost of living is increasing.
No, and that's been going on for the last couple of decades. That's not something that's relatively new. I was just watching a video report this morning looking at rents versus increases in wages and stuff like that. And it's just doing this, right? And that's just not rents, that's everything. But, you can look at it. We've talked about, how do you approach that specifically when wages, well, whenever you're in a JOB situation, I know we've got a lot of people that are in a W-2 situation where they've got a job, they're trading their time for money. Or selling a service for money. When you only have a limited service, or you've got a high competitive field, where you get a lot of people or things like that, it's a challenge to do that. So that's why it's so critical in not having a victim mentality. Here's the thing: you can be frustrated by it and things like that, but it doesn't mean that it's going to go away, right? And that's you got a segment of the population that, oh well, let's let the government take care of it. Well, that's called socialism, folks. And it's not going to work in the long run. Look at the Soviet Union, right? That was communism, socialism. A lot of look at Sweden and Finland. That's not true socialism either, if you really dig into the onion, so to speak. But how can you solve for it then, John? What's going on? Wendy, what can I do? Well, number one is look at alternative sources of income. And I'm not talking about quitting your job and going doing something, but I'm sure you're good at something, looking for additional resources like some side hustles, things like that. Selling your services or whatever the case may be, through websites, or if you're crafty or things like that. There's all kinds of things that you can do out there. That's the thing. There's so much money out there. It's just figuring out, okay, how can I go and participate in that? Right.
Right. Yeah. And it's amazing what an extra $500 to $1,000 a month can do for a family. And really with what we have today online, I mean, there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah. And I had a comment last week. So we talked about something similar on that specific subject. Somebody chimed in. It's like, I can't believe you're asking people that are working 50 hours a week to work more hours. And I'm like, okay, first of all, stop right there. That's a poor mindset that you have. Okay. We're not talking about working harder. What we're talking about, and I want to be very clear on this, we're talking about working smarter. Okay, working smarter. You've got all kinds of affiliate programs out there and everything else. And you ask yourself, what would an extra $500 or $1,000 do for your budget? Right? Probably make some big waves, right? Help you get out of debt, things like that. The other stuff that we talked about, stacking money for wealth, the emergency fund, or whatever the case may be. That's what we're talking about. Going out and finding other sources of income where you can leverage your time, or even leverage your, contacts or things like that. Or, this kind of leads me into the second one, which is leveraging your network, right? And, what does that mean, right? Well, Wendy, I want you to start this off because I know you're really, really good at that. But, when you have a network of friends, family, and I'm not talking about selling stuff to your friends. It's not what I'm talking about. So the negative Nellies out there, don't even start. But what I'm talking about is making those connections and things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change in my life in general was getting around different people. I moved from always being surrounded by people that were stuck in the 9 to 5 grind. This is my life. This is what we're doing. I'm going to repeat Groundhog's Day for the rest of my life, right? And living for the retirement, right? And then I
Hopefully it all
accidentally,
works out.
yeah, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I had no idea what I was doing when I got into entrepreneurship. But then I lost my job, and all of a sudden, I found myself in a different circle of people. And I had never done personal development. I had never had open dialogue and conversations about investing in money and investing in myself. And so, changing that circle and being intentional, like now, I mean, it's part of my everyday life that I'm intentional about who I surround myself with, and getting in rooms with people that have a higher level thinking, right? Because then it spurs our own creativity. And so that first thing we talked about, increasing our income, becomes a much more simple thing to do when you're surrounded by people with higher level conversations.